Take it away, Mary.
Thanks, Duncan. And thank you, Marc and Kari, for being here. You've put a lot of effort into putting this together and getting your studio ready for us to come in and see it. And we get to see a beautiful body of work, all your works in progress. So I know that many people are interested in hearing what you have to say. We're going to start by Marc and Kari just bringing us into their studio. Part of the filming will be Marc and Kari narrating. Part of it is pre-recorded. You can start narrating.
Yeah, here we are. So welcome to our studio. This is a hot July day in Cleveland, Ohio. So what you're looking at now, this is a piece called Full Circle, and it's kind of a lightweight collaborative. Sometimes Marc calls those the Yes Dear collaboratives, where he makes the birds for me. And this is part of my Safety Mom series. Both Marc and I use birds in a way as stand-ins for individuals and family. And this piece really is about the kind of the dichotomy about how we treat the people we love the most. It's sort of a loves me not type of thing. Birds and bees, daisies, the whole idea of pulling the petals off.
So there's a long hallway that leads into our studio, and at the end is this piece called Signs of Life, which is an early Navigator series piece of mine with these mechanical drawings of life forms on those stones, found stones. Kind of a Darwinian exploration of a region.
Yeah, so when you'll see our studio, we had Goldilocks syndrome when we were looking. Everything was either too big or too small, and we decided to go big. So this, as you enter, this is kind of a little bit of a flex space. I have a larger piece on the wall there. Big table that we work stuff out, little gallery area.
16-foot ceilings, lots of room for big projects and storage. This is just outside of Kari's flame working area.
Yeah, this is a piece called Grace, and I think I talk about that a little bit later in the video. And we're going to take you right into my space. So I have this nice large space that I work in. But first, it's very important, I felt, to show you the glue box where we put stuff when we're keeping stuff warm.
It's a high-tech cardboard box with a light bulb.
Yeah. So I work over here in the corner. You can see that big tube. That's my ventilation that goes down and sucks all the fumes off my torch out to the outside. I use bottled oxygen. I also have an oxygen concentrator. I sit at that little desk, and then I have a little annealer next to me for parts.
Okay, so I'm going to take you through just kind of quick overview of the entire space. This first area is it's a flex space, but it's largely a flat glass working space. So we have area for cutting sheet glass. Got a large tabletop glass cutter, the dog. Lots of bullseye glass storage. About 2012, we started working extensively with bullseye glass because of the compatibility, largely for my avian pieces, which are the marine pieces that you're seeing now. So that glass is all bullseye glass. So all those pieces start off as sheet glass.
We've made most of our equipment, but we have bought some of it, and so Marc's pointing out some of the...
Yeah, I think this is... we started an era around 1991 where most of the equipment you needed to fabricate yourself. Now there's a lot of different vendors that supply glass equipment. But back then you pretty much had to know how everything worked so that you could build it yourself. And one aspect that we really like about that is that we can customize the equipment to suit the needs of whatever body of work we have going on at any particular time.
So this is our powder storage. We melt clear crystal in the furnace and roll through colored glass powders. That's mostly how we do all our coloration.
So all of Kari's pieces are made with those different sorted glass powders, and many of mine as well. So this is the hot shop area. We have a couple glory holes. None of them are very large, but and they're typical, but they're also designed specifically for our needs, so they don't have the traditional barn doors that swing open. Like most hot shops, these doors slide to the side, so we're not having to find an assistant that can stand around, especially in this time of COVID. We've kind of eliminated having extra labor in the shop. So,
we've always lived somewhere where you couldn't easily get extra labor. So Marc built the doors so that they can open themselves. And that little green piece of equipment was our powder booth that sucks all the dust out while we're using it.
So I have a very small glory hole that I'm going to show now, which is, it's just much more efficient to run this very tiny. So that's the spheres that I do and the birds, they all happen in that little tiny glory hole. This is our furnace. It's 150 pounds of clear glass that's in a freestanding pot. We built this furnace as well. It's got a really nice door that opens and closes very effortlessly. Very efficient furnace, so we're very conscious of our green carbon print or non-green carbon footprint, so we're trying to keep it as green as possible. We have a heat recuperator on the back of this furnace so that the air that you're using to feed the flame is preheated with exhaust flue. So it takes the waste exhaust flue air and preheats the combustion air so that you're cooking a fire with hot air instead of cold air. It makes it a lot more efficient.
So right there is Marc's pride and joy, his Chris Craft motor that he's rebuilding.
That's the most important thing. Giant kiln in the background for doing, it's a 4 foot by 8 foot by, I think, 18-inch deep kiln for large flat glass fusings. This area is my woodworking area, so table saw, panel saw, routers, all the different woodworking equipment I need. I do all the framing and the wood turning and things that are in my pieces as well. And then I can work, there's a wall there that I can build, metal fabrication area. There's a wall there that I can build pieces in progress as I'm cutting the components over in the wood area.
And then we also have a garage door, a loading dock area, which is really helpful with the studio.
And then this is our cold shop, which is, we don't do a lot of cold applications, cold grinding applications that are visible to the finished piece. It's largely putty removal and cleanup. And we have enough equipment to kind of do that. We built that grinding wheel back in 1991. So it's a 30-year-old piece of grinding equipment that was made out of 2x4s because we didn't know how to weld at the time. And a tire we found on the hillside of North Carolina. But we've added some upgrades to it. I added a variable speed so I can speed it up or slow it down almost to barely moving. And I designed this nylon fence that goes up against the edge of it that we were having a hard time when we were grinding like the jewelry work where we needed a perpendicular edge. And so with that fence, we can keep the glass always at the same angle and just rotate it against that fence and grind a perfectly perpendicular edge to things. Bathroom with the shower is behind me in the hall. It's first studio we've had with the shower, which has been great.
Yeah, and we have magnetic heads. We use diamond, but the nice thing about that variable speed is that we also have just a metal, magnetic metal plate that we can put on, and we can also we can drip grind with grit.
Loose grit, which gives it less scratches in the finish.
Okay.
Kari's pointing out her very small hobbyist bandsaw that's under the counter there. But
that he's gave me a hard time with for buying, but we use it all the time.
It's been very handy.
It has been very handy.
It's kind of a joke.
And we're told that did they make torpedoes during World War II? World War II. That was what that building was built for.
So it's a massive brick structure that's very cool-ish, I guess. More cool in the summer. It takes a long time for that brick to heat up. And in the winter, it stays pretty warm. So it's been a nice, really great space for us.
Marc and Kari, you just showed us some incredibly technical bunches of equipment, and obviously your technical knowledge is incredible, but your work has so much spiritual dimension to it. So how do you marry the two of those together? I mean, you know, how do you keep that kind of spiritual and inner vision while you're working so technically.
Yeah, I think the technical aspects of the work are the least interesting to us. I mean, it's just the stuff that you have to figure
It's
out.
a means to the
It's
end.
a means to the end. Yeah. We love problem solving and that whole part, but also that's what we're least interested in talking about when we're talking about the work. We're always hoping that people aren't focusing on that, but really the ideas that go behind the work.
But it's an easier conversation to get into how you do things. But
Sure.
I know even family and close friends that know we've been making work for over 30 years don't really know what the work may be about. And it varies from series to series. But we went to a fine art school where the stress was on concept and what the ideas were. And then, yeah, it was just a means to the end. Kari always referred to it as the kind of the cowboy way. You know, we didn't necessarily learn certain traditional techniques. We kind of figured out what we needed to do to get the job done, whatever we had, whatever vision we decided we wanted to make. And then by working ourselves, we end up at every aspect, you really you stumble upon things as you're fabricating things that you had no idea about. And if you had just sent off designs, if we were designers and sent off our designs to be fabricated by somebody else, we'd miss out on all the kind of the mundane things that lead you to tangents that lead to new bodies of work.
And that really shows in your pieces. And as we go through the presentation of individual pieces, I think you can talk more about the concepts, both emotional and intellectual, behind those pieces too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think next, Marc, we're going to go back into the studio. You're going to talk a little bit about some of your processes.
After I make a big deal about concept, we're going to go talk about technique. So the glass boats, I'm largely a hot sculptor, but the boats aren't blown glass. They're canes that we pull in the studio with our furnace glass. It's several layers of clear glass rolled in glass powders, shoved in optimal to give it lines, compressed into a brick, and then pulled 40 feet long across the shop. Excuse me, need some water. Allow myself to catch up. Then I would chop those long rods into these short canes and lay them out into patterns. Like there's one on that piece of paper, and that becomes a boat. So there's the rails for the boat are on the outside, the keel is in the center. And then because it was extremely hot when we shot this, I do a cold version of a very hot demonstration. So I'm going to take these canes and transfer them onto a piece of masonite. And then I'm going to take that piece of masonite and transfer it onto what would normally be a very hot kiln shelf.
And he's putting it onto this pastorelli, and this is a piece of equipment that Marc built. We like to call it the Marchese, because normally when you're using a pastorelli, it's a lot of lifting a heavy tray at the end of a big long rod in and out of the annealer, but the glory hole. And but he's made it so that there's a piece of equipment that holds it, and you just pivot it, and it goes on the rolling yoke, so that I, as his assistant, don't have to build muscle or get too sweaty.
And you can, once you roll that into, and we made a door that's got a slot that accommodates this. So this door was made just for doing this process. So you can slide in on the slot and then close down on the piece, which eliminates a lot of the heat coming out. And she can actually let go of it at this point, walk away, and everything is still stable.
And it's very strange for us to go and demonstrate in other places, because we realize so much of the equipment, we're really lucky that Marc's handy and can build stuff for us, so that it's easier on us and not hot. And you go someplace else that doesn't have this, and now all of a sudden it's like, what? You know, you just are like a fish out of water when you don't have your equipment.
So now I'm taking this piece of paper, pretending it's the glass sheet that I pick up, and then we bend it into a trough shape, pinch the ends, cut the ends, fold them up, and open it up, and it becomes a glass boat. So that's technically how I make the components for my Navigator series. And I forgot what I'm talking about in that moment there. Then these are the spheres from my Find and Seek series. So these are actually air bubbles that are in the shape of letters trapped inside of solid glass spheres. So that one's got some silver leaf. I do a lot of experimenting to try to figure out what the next thing's going to be. A lot of failures. That was aluminum foil like that. I thought it was silver, but it was aluminum foil.
Okay, so the bird marini, and also what we use for the jewelry, is it starts with a pattern. So it's got it all cut out to scale. And then we cut strips out of the sheet glass and stack it up with just a little bit of tack between each layer of a dot of Elmer's glue on the edges. And this gets stacked into these bricks of pattern. And then these patterns go into a cold oven and they're brought up into just above annealing temperature so they start to tack fuse together. And then Marc picks them up on a collar that he makes with just melting scraps of the bullseye sheet glass, because this glass is not compatible with what we melt in the furnace. And so he picks it up onto a long 20, he has a special one that he uses for pulling that cane that has a loop on it. So Marc uses this, and there's a, this gets hooked to a clip and then pulled all the way up to the ceiling, and he pulls this straight down into these long, and then cuts it into these long rods that go into the annealing oven to cool down. And then from here, these are chopped into little pieces. Actually, we have a video of that as well that we can attach of these getting chopped. But basically, they get chopped into little squares, and these little squares then get bound up, and then these get fused together into a tablet.
So once the marinis are chopped, they're laid out into a pattern. For these avian pieces, I lay out 2 tablets that are identical. So this bird sits on a tablet. I've made 2 tablets using loose marini that get fused into these sheets where the bird has been deconstructed and broken down into a flat pattern. So this area here is the top of the shoulders, top of the head, this is the chest. So it's essentially divided up into quarters. The top quarter is the head and neck, the bottom 3 quarters is the back and belly, and then that is divided in half. This part here becomes the back of the bird, and this becomes the chest of the bird. So I take one of these tablets and I'll heat it up on the Pastorella unit and roll that into a cylinder, close the end of the cylinder down, and make a bubble, and then that's blown and sculpted into the bird. And then the other tablet is kept as a tablet so it can be displayed. And this piece, this body of work actually still represents and references the maps that I'm thinking of, but in this particular instance, it's more of an individual's cartography, its DNA, its makeup. So all of the little lines and dashes and experience that are in this original tablet are also apparent in the final book. So, and then from the technology we gleaned from making these marini pieces, I'd already known how to make birds. I made birds for years out of just gathering glass bubble and sculpting that bubble into a glass bird. And I started thinking when I was doing workshops, like if I was going to do a new animal, I wouldn't start a whole bunch of marini and all the time invested in making a marini and just throw it to the wind and hope I sculpted a good animal. So then I started thinking, well, I made this graph paper pattern on a screen print, where I could screen print powders right onto the glass. So that's essentially what this is, where I screen print this pattern and then I could sculpt the animal out of that flat roll-up pattern, and I could see the push and the pull and the distortion and kind of get an idea of where the glass is going to expand and contract and how it's going to affect the pattern. Like in the birds, when I'm working on the bird patterns, there's a lot of glass here for just a small little head. This area in here gets expanded greatly, but this area in here gets contracted. So you can use different size marinis depending on where it is in the piece. And then this was made out of a cylinder as well as this. But there's a limitation to how much thickness there's in the glass and how I can pull the legs and changes things. So then I started thinking, if I started with a pattern that was more like an animal skin rug, then when I pick it and fold it up, I have the extremities already made. This was actually
poor calculations. I didn't have enough mass to make it around even with my smallest tweezers to seal it up. But this is one of the things that I think is really important when you make your own work. There's a lot of discoveries that are made. I think there's a lot of information here in this uncompleted, folded up. Like I like the seam on the bottom of this, but this is a sealed up bubble, and it offers different things visually with the inflation and the expansion than something like this, where the opportunity is there for interior imagery to be different from the exterior imagery. So this is kind of where things may be going next. 2006 is when I started this. No, 2016 is when I started this, and I haven't touched it since. But this chocolate deer, same thing. It's just proving a process where I could sculpt this deer all from the interior, except for adding the legs. And it would be done with a pattern like this, where I traditionally sculpt things, I push and pull and grab from the outside. If I do too much of that with the pattern gets destroyed.
In this little piece, I think sort of the idea of the DNA and the maps and that whole thing. This is pi written out to like gazillion numbers. This was a piece that you did when you were in school.
No, right after school, like
Right
1992.
after school, it's super dusty. Enamel class and then the engraved pi. But I see the origins of all the work in it. I see everything's really different on the surface, but I see the connections, like the numbers and the letters and the DNA and the nature. And you hang around here long enough, you can draw a line to everything.
Yeah, I mean, even this piece here, these two pieces, these are quite old too. 2003. This is a diptych I did. This is about communication. So there's still the map and this overriding influence of geography on who we are and our personality. To me, this is about communications, sending out messages to be put in bottles and sent out in the world, which is part of this dialogue. And this is messages, all that's been said. So these little pieces of beach glass are kind of snippets of past conversation, past memory. And it's the closed beak on the bird.
And we both tend to use birds or type or words, or like there's an overlap in our work, like we're using type or you're using type. Just
Yeah,
words.
this is the bubble that we
Yeah.
exist in. So we're looking at each other's work as we're making things.
And
Kari's
we
my
can
biggest
steal from
side.
each other, which is wonderful, because you can't all steal from each other.
For sure.
We share.
So I love that you talked about working together and looking at each other's work and the common threads that have gone through the work throughout your careers. Now that you're in the studio together, is this even more of an intense process?
I think it comes with age, the idea of ego being taken out of it. So I think it's the borders of who's doing what or who's behind what is really, we're not as interested in that as maybe we were at one
Yeah,
time.
getting credit was more important for me
Yeah.
in the past,
Yeah.
for sure.
It just feels more like we're both really in each other's work all the time now.
Yeah, I can't really look at any piece that I've made that just has my name on it and not think that, a lot of the major decisions were assisted by asking Kari her opinion on something. So in the beginning, when I first started showing work, her career took off before mine did, and I would go to a sofa show and someone would say, well, I know you make birds for Kari, but what do you do? Which would always kill me, because it's like, no, those are my birds. She just used them better than I did. But now I don't really care anymore. It's like so that part's gone. Now for us, it's how can we get done what we need to get done? So that has definitely helped,
And helping doing the work that you guys have in the gallery now, the Loving Cup series, where we really actually physically had to work in the hot shop together, because we hadn't done that in 20 years or something.
Wow.
That was really bumpy. That was like great quarantine practice. Like we were ready for the marathon, because we just had to work through a lot of stuff. It was really hard. And then we were really good together in the hot shop. And so now I'm the only assistant in the hot shop. And it turns out I'm a pretty good assistant. And that was the big surprise, like that I enjoy working in there with him, and we work well together. So that's been really nice.
Yeah, that's a new thing that happened with the Love and Cup collaborations. Prior
They're
to
beautiful pieces.
oh, thank
Thank
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Kari prior to that didn't spend a lot of time in the hot shop. She was primarily, flame working and doing that stuff. So it was good.
Well, I think that's a great example of a life well lived and well developed as a couple. And the Love and Cup series really shows that. So I look forward to seeing those. I think the next film, Kari, is showing your space, I believe. So we're going kind of from the group space now back to your space, your individual space. Bear with us.
Okay, so I'm primarily a lamp worker, so that means I use a torch. Right now, my space is set up for doing soldering. So I've got a little jeweler's torch, but I'm modeling my ventilation there, which is super important. And pointing out my torches and this is a hand torch that I use when I'm making my work. I'm always a little taken aback when people are afraid of my work, because when I'm making it, it's so physical. I'm usually making pretty large pieces and I'm holding it and I've got the torch in. For me, it's a very physical activity. That's a little souped up toaster that I use for doing rapid prototypes. And this is just my little annealer if I'm making flowers, where it goes. This plate glass is where I draw out my patterns. And then it's a modified typing desk. And I have a chair that has an easy adjusting lever on it. And I adjust my chair just as much as I do my torch. It's really important to be at the right height for myself. I have really simple tools, a collection of tweezers, a little cigar cutter, and I use scissors. And I have a leaf making smashing tool. And I will make pedal cane maybe all one day. So that's a little can of pedal cane that I have already made. You can see one of the birds drawn on a piece of plate glass over there. Right there, I keep little jars of all those powders that we had in the other room, and I roll through the powders. And then as I'm making pieces, a lot of times I'll just sort them into these little drawers, and they're really kind of fun when there's a lot to go in and pull the little drawers out and look inside. And I keep samples around so you can see my samples so I can remember, color combinations and what looks good.
So this all starts as clear glass that we pull out of our furnace and then roll in those powder glasses that we showed earlier.
Yeah, so Marc pulls the cane for me the length of the studio, and I just have a kind of a base. I have some greens and some yellows and some blues, and I'm using it in a really kind of a watercolor type of way. So if I'm using a yellow cane and then I'm rolling through some pink, you get kind of like an orangey pink cast to it. So I have an infinite palette from the whole thing.
And these canes are the ones in your vessels.
Yes, that's what I make all my work. And it's compatible with the furnace glass. So if Marc makes a bird and attaches these canes to it, then I can use it into the rest of my piece. And this is a painting that I found in my garage a little while ago. I made that when I was in high school. That was part of my portfolio to get into school. It's metal bowls with patterned tablecloths reflecting in it. And when I found the painting and looked at it, I was like, I have been making the same piece my entire life. Like, it just was really funny to see that. And this piece is a little tear catcher. It says 1818, and people are really skeptical about that, but I don't care. I just think about those people, JJ and MW, and it's got these little bumps on the side that I like to feel. And I always wonder like who they were and why I have this little piece. It's just, there's a story there, and it's an object, and it feels like an heirloom. And sometimes a fork is just a fork, but sometimes if it's the fork that your grandmother used or came from Poland or whatever, it's more than a fork. And objects have that ability to be more than what they are. And that piece fueled the Gardener's Valentine series. And so that's based on sailors' Valentines. And some of them are traditional. They have sentiments in them. And then I think we're going to see a close-up of my favorite, which is what I call my Funny Valentine.
We are, yeah.
I got a little cynical after that, but it was really a fun series to make. And that, I think, is, you can draw a line between that and the loving cup. So there's a real natural connection to that idea. And I'm always sort of thinking about family and connections. This piece is entitled Grace. It's actually a smaller, it was a really big piece. This is like a smaller connection. But again, I'm looking at this sort of differently now during this time. So they're birds and they're in these cages, but the birds are part of the structure of the cage. And this was a rumination on motherhood for me. I like to think it's about the particular pain of parenting teenagers. And it's really about being there all the time, making something that can't confine, that you want your children to go and to come back, but you need to be there all the time. And there's such a boredom in mothering teenagers where you feel stuck. You have to be around all the time because you never know when you're going to get that opportunity to talk. And if you're not there at the right time, you've lost that opportunity. But there's a lot of time in the middle that you just, when they're little, you know what to do and you're watching them, but just being available can feel very confining. And I love these pieces hanging on the wall. They're not lit particularly well in the studio, but I love a big strong light because it casts a long shadow, which I feel is really reminiscent of parenthood. I think the experiences that we've had growing up cast a long shadow. And then when you step back, you see that your situation isn't unique. It's repeated again and again throughout the community. And here I'm showing you a drawing of the bird on the glass. And that's how I start with the drawing. I'm not particularly concerned about the kind of bird that it is. I just want something that looks dynamic. And I go back in and go over the lines and get a good line quality going. And then I'm making it flat, and then I'm attaching it into the cage and then giving it, bending it to the form and giving it some dimension.
Was this a commission or part of a commission?
This isn't. This is just a piece that I've been working on for a long time. I got a grant and have been working on it. And I had an opportunity to participate in a show that had a ginormous space. And so I made the piece for that space. And every once in a while I get an opportunity to exhibit it whole. And
the original piece is probably 3 times as many components.
Yeah, so it fills the wall. And it's really an interesting thing using glass. So when it's lit optimally, the shadow makes a stronger line than the glass because the glass reflects. And so it's really interesting that what's not there is stronger than what's there. So you can really play with it. And it was just up at American Greetings headquarters a couple months ago. So that was really fun to have that big space to do it in. But I like keeping it around.
A perfect, wonderful description of what those pieces are. Thank you.
So this is a blank for one of my banded vessels. This is a really big one. It's a little bit difficult when you're working with somebody else and building these forms because you're used to building a complete form when it's on the pipe, but really these are made in half, or they're not complete. So they get cut at the widest part, and then
I determine the size of the ring that goes inside, and I'll build the framework, and then the stuff will spill out. This is actually a second because it had all schmutz on the lip, but it's a nice thing just to keep around so that we, because we're really bad at throwing things away. So this piece this part would have started as one piece, got cut in a single hop apart. So Marc scores it all the way around, and then it goes on a Lazy Susan with a tiny flame on it, and we hit the flame on just the part that's scored, spinning it on the Lazy Susan so it gets hot, and eventually it pops. It makes a huge noise and is really scary. And if you're lucky, it pops beautifully like this did. It just needs a little bit of grinding to get the sharp edge off. And then I make my rings so that they fit exactly to the broken part. And then this, where there's a dot dash cane all between it, I'm taking the green canes and the white canes and cutting them up into little pieces, and then reattaching them into one giant long cane. And then I'm taking that giant long cane and I'm bending it into a circle. And you'll see that all of my flowers have stems on them. And so, let me just flip this over so that. And I keep, when I'm making my flowers, I pull my petal stock. So I've made, this is all a pink petal with a white line. And then I use these egg crates. And if I'm making something like a dahlia flower, it has different size petals. So I might sort them into these different sizes so that I have the different sizes when I go make it. So I won't start making flowers until I have all my petals made. And then all my flowers, when they're made, get put on a stem. These are, after I make this flower, it goes into the annealing oven. But I'm never getting this part hot again when I'm putting it into my piece. I'm only heating it up here on the stem so that I can spot heat my work and put it together. And then when it's all done, I'm putting it in a cold oven and bringing it up to temperature and annealing it that way.
Well, thank you for sharing that little bit of insight into the magic behind those pieces that you are so well known for, Kari. You know, I know that even though you look at a piece and you know there's a lot of work involved, it's just amazing the intricacy of the work that you do. Let's see, I think we're going to now, oh, first of all, we have a few comments. Somebody asked, Joni asked if you are located still in Ohio. Are you still in Ohio?
Yeah,
We are.
You are, okay. And now you said you're in a house that you now have been in for 2 years, and COVID has helped you really focus on that, and hopefully you're gonna stay there. You've moved around a lot in the last, what'd you say, 4 years or?
Yeah, the last 6 years we've moved twice. So we made a big move from Ohio back to from Cleveland or from Connecticut back to Ohio, and but we didn't have a lot of time to find a home, so we found a 4-year home, and we always knew it was going to be a 4-year home.
Just to get the youngest one through high school, and then we would.
Sure.
But we're
Sure.
big nesters, so to live in something that you know is going to be temporary was just a really strange way to live. And it was a house, it was a beautiful house, but also didn't necessarily suit our personality. So it was an interesting experience, but it was like not being home for 4 years. So now we're back, but we've been working really, really hard and really hadn't had any time to make this house our own. So
So new house, new studio, new work, so it's great.
You're the host. You're the
We're
host.
going to show these loving cups that you've been talking about. Thank you. That's a wonderful overview of just a small part of what you do. And I love the way they all interconnect with your home, with parenthood, with your artistic sensibilities. And we really look forward to having more work come out of this great studio of yours. So, Duncan, how do you feel? I think Duncan's going to unmute himself. And
Yes, your studio is incredible. I am very jealous of that amount of space that you have and the equipment that you built. I'm going to be talking to you very shortly about some of those pivoting devices you have for the L'Oreal.
Yep.
DMG could use those. But the work is absolutely beautiful. I'm familiar over many years with your work, but to see some of these pieces that I'd never seen before was a real treat. So really thank you for doing this today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. It's been really fun to stay connected and to be able to share the studio. The studio's kind of a fun place, and we always like showing it off because you always pull out drawers and see stuff that you forgot about. Yeah, it's great.
We have another comment from this man that we may know, Jason Chakravarti, and he says, "What a rad couple of artists! Great work." Jason's been watching very carefully, as has everyone else. We've had a wonderful group today tune in, and they've been glued to your presentation. And we want to thank everyone. Hi, Marion, for being here. Yeah, and hopefully, if anyone has any questions about the Loving Cup series or any of the images, we have all those images in high res. We're happy to get them to you with information. Also, the gallery is open by appointment. Duncan and everyone there has gone through great lengths to make sure that we're following all the sanitation rules. If you come, you can be sure to be very safe. We'd love to see you. We have a lot of work set up, and you can come and have a personal viewing and shopping experience. You can get to see some of the work you've seen today. So please feel free to contact the gallery and go on over there. And again, if you would like any of these images, let us know. And thank you so much for tuning in, really. And thank you, Marc and Kari. You worked really hard. You were really great. Thank you.